The sound reached me before the sight did, glass shattering, sharp and violent, somewhere inside the house. I froze on the porch, my hand halfway to the doorknob, rainwater dripping from my sleeve. For a second, I thought maybe the wind had blown something over. But then I heard her voice, low, rushed, almost panicked. It wasn't the kind of panic that comes from being afraid. It was the kind that comes from getting caught. I pushed the door open just enough to hear the other voice. A man's, deeper, smoother than mine, each word drawn out like it deserved attention. I couldn't make out what he said, but I felt the tone. It wasn't friendly. The hallway light was on, spilling a narrow beam toward the kitchen. My shoes left little wet circles on the hardwood as I stepped inside, keeping my weight on the edges of my feet to stay quiet. I caught the smell of something expensive, cologne I didn't own, mixing with the faint scent of burned coffee. Then I saw them. She was standing with her back to me, leaning against the counter like it was holding her up. He was closer to her than I'd ever stand in public, his hand resting just above her hip, thumb tracing lazy patterns on the fabric of her dress. He didn't see me yet. She did. Her shoulders stiffened, and for one heartbeat, neither of us moved. The man finally noticed the shift, turned his head, and smiled at me. Not awkwardly, not apologetically. Smiled like I'd just walked into his home, not mine. And that's when I knew I wasn't supposed to be here tonight. And he was. He didn't move away from her. Didn't even flinch. Just kept that smug, patient smile fixed on his face, like he'd been expecting me for hours. "Edgar," he said. The sound of my name coming from his mouth made my stomach tighten. I'd never seen him before, but he spoke like we'd met a dozen times. I glanced at Marlene, hoping for some kind of explanation, but she just pressed her lips together, her eyes darting toward him like she was silently begging him to take the lead. I took one step into the kitchen. "You know my name? That's impressive," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "Care to explain why you're in my house?" Instead of answering, he turned back to the counter, picked up the mug sitting there, and took a slow sip. "Your wife makes terrible coffee," he said. "Too much bitterness, not enough patience." Then he placed the mug down carefully, like even that gesture had meaning. Marlene finally spoke. "Edgar, please, let me explain. You're making this." I cut her off. "No, you're making this. You don't get to." The man stepped between us like he owned the air in the room. "We should talk," he said quietly, almost kindly. "But not here. Not now. You're angry, and anger makes people sloppy." That's when I noticed something in his eyes. Not fear, not guilt, but calculation. He wasn't some random fling. This was a man who had already decided exactly how this night would end. And something told me it wouldn't be me walking away with the upper hand. I should have thrown him out. I should have grabbed my keys and left. Instead, I froze, because deep down, I needed to know why a stranger was in my kitchen, touching my wife, and acting like I was the uninvited one. The silence stretched too long. Then he leaned in just enough for only me to hear. "You don't want to make me your enemy, Edgar." That was the moment I knew this wasn't going to end with yelling or slammed doors. Whatever game he was playing, I was already a piece on the board, and he'd been moving me long before I walked in. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. I lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen like it was mocking me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that man's face, calm, unhurried, like he knew exactly how my life was going to unravel and was just waiting for me to catch up. By sunrise, I decided I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of seeing me fall apart. I'd go upstairs, pack a bag, and disappear for a while. But when I opened my phone to check my bank account, planning to book a hotel, my chest tightened. 2 withdrawals. Both large. Both processed sometime after midnight. One from our joint account. One from my personal savings. And the worst part? Both approved using my online banking credentials. I stumbled into the kitchen. Marlene was there, looking pale, her hair tied back like she hadn't slept either. She didn't look surprised to see me. She looked guilty. Or maybe just resigned. Before I could speak, she slid an envelope across the counter toward me. "What's this?" I asked. "Something you need to see," she said. Inside were 3 printed emails. None of them were from her. They were between that man and someone at a law firm I didn't recognize. My name came up in every single one. Not as a subject. Not as a client. As a problem. The language was careful, vague, but there were phrases like ensure compliance, acquire assets quietly, and push final step by end of quarter. I looked up at her. Marlene, what is this? She pressed her hands flat on the counter. Edgar, I didn't mean for it to happen like this. I didn't mean for him to. She stopped herself, biting her lip hard. To what? Empty my accounts? Walk into my house like he owns it? I snapped. She glanced toward the window, as if expecting to see him standing there in the yard. You don't understand who he is. You can't just push back. He doesn't forgive that. I wanted to demand answers, but the sound of an engine idling outside cut through my thoughts. I walked to the front window and pulled the curtain back an inch. The same black sedan from the night before sat at the curb. Engine running. No one getting out. It stayed there for hours. By noon, I wasn't sure if the message was that they were watching me, or that they wanted me to know they were watching me. By the time the clock hit 3 in the afternoon, the black sedan outside had become less of a mystery and more of a threat that was drilling into my brain. I kept glancing at it from different windows, never catching more than the shadow of a figure in the driver's seat. I thought about calling the police, but then what would I say? There's a car outside my house, and it makes me uncomfortable. I knew exactly how that would end. They'd drive by, maybe tap on the window, and the car would be gone. And then, the next time I looked, it would be back. These people were playing a game I didn't know the rules to, but I could already tell the police weren't part of the board. Around 4, the doorbell rang. I don't know why I answered. Maybe part of me wanted this over with. Maybe I just wanted to stop feeling like prey. When I opened the door, it wasn't Marlene's stranger. It was a young man in a tailored suit, clean-cut, smiling in a way that didn't reach his eyes. He handed me a small white envelope, nodded once, and walked away without a word, stepping into the sedan, which pulled off smoothly and disappeared down the street. The envelope was heavier than it should have been. Inside was a single folded sheet of thick, cream-colored paper. On it, in perfectly neat handwriting, were 7 words. Dinner. The Harbor Club. 8 p.m. alone. No name, no signature. But I didn't need one. I knew exactly who it was from. Marlene walked into the hallway as I was still staring at the note. Her face drained when she saw it, and for a second I thought she might try to grab it from me. Don't go, she said quickly. Just don't. Whatever you think you're going to get out of him, you won't. That's the thing, I said, my voice quieter than I intended. I'm not going to get anything. I'm going to find out what he already has. The Harbor Club wasn't the kind of place you just walked into. It was one of those ultra-exclusive private dining clubs where memberships cost more than my car, and privacy was part of the menu. I'd never been inside, but I'd seen the building. All dark wood, heavy drapes, and windows that gave away nothing. At 7:55, I stepped through the polished glass doors and immediately felt like I'd crossed into enemy territory. The maitre d' didn't ask my name. He just nodded, as if my arrival had been anticipated down to the second, and led me to a private room at the far end of the hall. He was there, sitting at the head of a long table, a glass of red wine in hand. The lighting was dim enough to make the shadows feel alive. He didn't get up, didn't extend a hand. Edgar, he said smoothly, as if greeting an old friend. You made the right choice. I sat down, keeping my hands on the table so he could see they weren't shaking, even though they were. You've got my attention, I said. Now tell me why you're circling my life like a vulture. He smiled faintly, set the wine down, and leaned forward just enough for me to see the cold precision in his eyes. Because, he said, your life isn't yours anymore, and I'm here to explain the terms. He didn't blink when he said it. He just let the words hang in the air, as if giving me time to realize they weren't some dramatic metaphor. I leaned back in my chair, trying to read his expression, but it was like staring at a wall, nothing to give away what was behind it. Not mine anymore? I asked, forcing a laugh I didn't feel. What does that even mean? He rested his elbows on the table, steepling his fingers. It means you've been in my ledger for some time now, and everything in my ledger belongs to me. Not in theory. In practice. He let that sink in before continuing. Your business contracts. Your accounts. The mortgage you think you own. Even that little safety deposit box at Sanderson Bank. You've been walking through a house of cards you didn't know I built, and now I'm telling you the wind's about to pick up. My throat went dry. The way he said it, like he wasn't bluffing, like every piece of my life had already been cataloged, made my stomach twist. Why? I asked. Why me? I'm nobody. I sell logistics services to mid-sized companies and complain about my neighbors leaving their trash bins out too long. You could buy and sell people with actual influence. So why the hell are you at my kitchen counter with my wife? That faint smile returned, and I hated how calm it made him look. Because people with influence know they have it. They're harder to motivate. But people like you still believe you're safe. That's valuable. The waiter entered silently, setting down 2 plates neither of us had ordered. Something expensive, garnished like art. I didn't touch mine. The stranger, he still hadn't told me his name, cut into his with surgical precision. Between bites, he said, Marlene came to me with a problem. I solved it. And when I solve a problem, I expect something in return. That's where you come in. I gripped the edge of the table. If this is about money, he interrupted with a slight shake of his head. It's not about money. Not the kind you're thinking. I'm asking for cooperation. Certain tasks. Certain introductions. You'll receive instructions when it's time. Refuse, and well. He set down his fork, his tone sharpening without getting louder. Refuse, and you'll spend the rest of your short future cleaning up messes you never made, until you have nothing left but the clothes on your back. I wanted to tell him to go to hell. I wanted to stand up and walk out, slam the door, never look back. But his eyes told me he wasn't making a threat. He was stating a fact. And then there was the unspoken detail gnawing at me. Marlene. She had gone to him. For what? What kind of problem had she traded my freedom to solve? As I sat there, silent, his smile widened just enough to let me know he'd already decided I would agree. Good, he said finally, as if I'd answered without speaking. Your first instruction will come soon. Go home, Edgar. Enjoy what's left of your peace. He stood, leaving me alone in the dim room, the untouched plate of food in front of me growing colder by the second. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I was afraid, because I knew, without a doubt, that whatever was coming next would make tonight look like a friendly handshake. 2 days passed without a word from him, but it didn't feel like silence. It felt like waiting for a storm you can hear in the distance but can't see yet. Every sound seemed sharper. The hum of the fridge, the creak of the front steps, even the quiet rustle of mail being slipped through the slot made my chest tighten. I was jumpy enough that Marlene barely spoke to me, and when she did, it was short and tight, like she didn't want to say the wrong thing. On the 3rd morning, just after sunrise, I found the envelope. It wasn't in the mailbox. It was inside my house, on the kitchen counter, placed neatly next to the coffee maker. No one had broken in. The locks were untouched, no windows open. But somehow, someone had walked into my home without leaving a trace and set it there. I stared at it for a long minute before I touched it, half expecting it to pulse in my hand like a living thing. Inside was a single typed sentence. Deliver the package from Locker 312, Southridge Station, to 47, North Gable Street before 11 a.m. Do not open it. Beneath the words was a key, heavy and cold, with a small metal tag stamped 312. No signature, no explanation, no hint of what would happen if I refused. I told myself not to go. I told myself this was the first step into a hole I'd never crawl out of. But at 8:15, I was standing in front of Locker 312 in the nearly empty underground storage section of Southridge Station, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like angry wasps. The key slid in too easily, and when the door opened, I saw a plain cardboard box about the size of a shoebox, sealed with a single strip of packing tape. No labels, no markings. It felt heavier than it should have, and when I tilted it slightly, something inside shifted, not sliding, but moving with weight and intention, like it was packed to keep something still. I thought about opening it. I thought about just walking away and leaving it there. But the idea of him knowing I'd defied a direct order twisted my gut in a way I couldn't ignore. By 10:47, I was at 47, North Gable Street, an old brick building with boarded windows and a rusted fire escape clinging to its side like it hadn't given up yet. The front door was ajar, the smell of damp wood and dust spilling into the street. I stepped inside, calling out once, and the echo made the empty space feel even larger. I set the box on a warped table in the center of the room, just like the instructions had implied. As I turned to leave, I noticed something in the corner, a single chair, and on it, a folded piece of paper. My name was written on the front in perfect block letters. I picked it up, hands cold, and unfolded it. Inside, in the same precise handwriting as the dinner invitation, were 5 words. You just passed the test. I didn't hear the door behind me close until the lock clicked. The click of the lock was like a gunshot in the silence. I spun around, my pulse spiking, but the door was already shut tight, and there was no sound of footsteps retreating. Whoever had locked it was either gone without a sound or still inside with me. The air was stale, heavy with the smell of old paper and damp wood, and the thin strip of light coming from a boarded-up window caught on the dust drifting in the air like tiny, lazy snowflakes. I called out, my voice sounding too loud in the emptiness, but no answer came. The box I delivered sat there on the table like it was daring me to open it now, but my eyes kept going back to the note in my hand. You just passed the test. A test for what? The handwriting was steady, deliberate, the kind you see from someone who never rushes anything because they know they're in control. That's when I heard it, a faint scraping sound from somewhere deeper inside the building. Not fast, not frantic, but slow and deliberate, like something being dragged across the floor. I hesitated, torn between pressing my ear to the door and going toward the sound. My gut told me that leaving wasn't an option anymore, not until someone decided I could. I followed the noise, my footsteps echoing too loudly on the warped boards. The hall was narrow, lined with peeling wallpaper and doors that looked like they hadn't been opened in decades. At the end, a faint glow spilled from a doorway. I stepped inside to find a single bare bulb swinging from the ceiling, casting restless shadows across the room. In the center, an old wooden chair faced away from me, and someone was sitting in it. The figure didn't move when I entered, but the scraping sound stopped instantly. My mouth went dry. "Who's there?" I asked, my voice cracking slightly despite my best effort. Slowly, the chair turned, and my stomach dropped. It was a man I'd never seen before, but he was wearing my jacket. Not one like it, my jacket. The one I'd left hanging in the hall closet that morning. His hands rested calmly in his lap, and he studied me with an expression that was too blank to be harmless. After a long pause, he said, "He told me you'd come. Said you'd follow the sound." "Who?" I asked, though I already knew. The man smiled faintly. "Your benefactor. The one who owns your next move. He wanted me to tell you that from here on, every choice you make is part of the job. You can't tell which ones matter and which ones don't, but all of them lead somewhere." I opened my mouth to demand answers, but before I could, he leaned forward, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "You're leaving here tonight, Edgar. But you won't be going home. You're going where he tells you. And you won't see Marlene again until he's done with you." Something in my chest went cold. The man stood, walked past me without looking back, and the front door that had been locked was now standing wide open. Outside, the black sedan waited, its engine already running. The sedan's back door swung open without anyone inside reaching for it, like it was inviting me in. For a long moment, I stood on the cracked pavement, the cool night air in my lungs, thinking about running. But deep down, I knew there was no running from this, at least not yet. I climbed in, and the door closed behind me with the soft finality of a vault sealing shut. The driver was the same young man who had delivered the dinner invitation, eyes fixed on the road ahead. We didn't speak. Streetlights slid across the leather interior as we drove through parts of the city I didn't recognize, until finally the car slowed in front of an old waterfront warehouse. The driver glanced at me for the first time and simply said, "Inside." The interior of the warehouse was nothing like I expected. Instead of cold, empty space, it was warm and lit, with polished wood floors and walls lined with old photographs in gold frames. At the far end, sitting in a high-backed chair like some patient king, was him. He gestured for me to come closer. "I suppose you want to know why," he said, his tone almost casual. "Why all of this? Why her? Why you?" I didn't answer. I just stood there, waiting. He leaned forward, folding his hands. "Your wife came to me because you were in trouble, Edgar. You just didn't know it yet. A business partner of yours, one you've trusted for years, was setting you up to take the fall for something very illegal. Fraud, laundering, the kind of thing that leaves you in a cell for the rest of your life. Marlene didn't know how to stop it, but she knew I could." My thoughts stumbled over themselves, replaying the last weeks in a new, blinding light. "So the accounts." "I moved your money," he interrupted. "Not to take it, but to keep it out of reach until it was safe. Those tests you passed, they were to prove to me that you could follow instructions, even when you didn't understand the stakes. And now you're here because the threat is gone. Your partner is finished. And you, Edgar, you're free." I felt the tension in my chest loosen in a way I hadn't thought possible. Why not just tell me from the start? He smiled faintly. Because you wouldn't have believed me. And because you needed to see how quickly your life could vanish if you didn't learn to trust the right people. From the shadows at the edge of the room, Marlene appeared. She looked tired, older somehow, but her eyes were steady on mine. I'm sorry, she said. I had to let you think the worst so you'd go along with it. I didn't want to lose you, to prison, or worse. For the first time in weeks, my mind wasn't spinning with questions. I walked toward her, and for a moment, we just stood there, the silence between us different now. Heavy, but not with suspicion. With understanding. When we left the warehouse, the sedan wasn't waiting. Just the two of us, walking down the quiet dock toward the city lights, the cold air sharp but clean. The life we were going back to wouldn't be the same as the one we'd left, but it would be ours again. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough.